Alright, in this first video for this semester, we're going to go over how to make the site plan for your project and how to start a REVIT file and go over some basic things such as importing AutoCAD files, setting the location of your project, creating a Topo Surface and adding some regions to that Topo Surface to work as roads. And then we're also going to get into some slight massing and working with levels. So to kind of get everything started, you should have a different start menu. You could probably say new project right here. But for me, we have to go up here and go file new. Once you have it open, we are just going to start with an architectural template. Hit OK. In an office environment, your offices will typically have their own template kind of ready to go with your office standards in there. Alright, so just some very basic stuff about REVIT, just to go over what we're looking at on the general screen here. So over here, this is your project browser. This is how you get around in a REVIT model. You can see all your views up here, legends, schedules, sheets. We don't have any because you can't expand any of these. Families and groups. So families are some of the building blocks we use to make these models. You can see when I came in, it drops me on level 1 right here, and that's why that's in bold, because that's the active view. So this is a floor plan. You are seeing elevations. These are elevation markers of nothing. There's no building in here, but it starts you off with some elevations. Up here, this is your properties. So what this is it tells you everything about what is selected. In this case, since I haven't selected anything, it defaults back to the floor plan view that we're in. If I select one of these little elevation markers, you can see it tells me the properties about that. If I click off of that, back onto the floor plan, it tells us about the floor plan. Up here, this is your ribbon. This is where all of your tools will be, and it changes depending on what you have selected and what tab you're on. So these are the tabs across the top. Down here, this is your view bar. This tells you everything about the view you're in. It says the scale, the level of detail, the rendering style that it's in, the sun, shadows. Is the view cropped? Is the crop view visible? These are temporary hide and isolate commands. This shows hidden elements. And there's just a couple other items, including the displacement and other view items. But the main ones are these first half a dozen or so. Over here, your selection tools. So this is a filter by what's selected. This is click and drag, click by plane. You can pin items. Those are the main items over there. So right now, what we're going to do to get started is we're going to import in the CAD file that everyone's been given. So we'll go to Insert, the Insert tab. You have a couple different ways to bring in CAD. You can link it, link CAD, or you can import CAD. Importing CAD drops it in here, and it's stuck in here, and it will never change until you delete it out of there. Linking CAD is a smart idea if you're working on one floor plan and you want to bring it in, but you know you're going to also still be editing it in AutoCAD. Then it'll update when you reload the link. Best practices for that is if you're going to do that, put each of your floor plans on in their own AutoCAD file. So otherwise, when you hit Link CAD, you're going to see all your floor plans, and you might just want to see one. So in this case, I'm going to link the CAD, and I'm going to go to the location of the site plan file that has been provided for this class. Hit open. Alright, if I zoom out, we'll see where we are. So here's our main site up here. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete these elevations because we'll remake them. So to delete them, I'm just clicking top left, holding it until I release. That's selected. You can see it selected the view and the, if I click here the filter, you can see it's a view and an elevation. And then I can just push the delete button. Yep. And I can select the rest of them, delete them all at once. We'll remake all of that in the proper location. Alright, so we have this CAD file in here. It's going to be the basis for us working. It has a north arrow up here. So what we're going to first do before we get too far into anything is make sure we have our location correct and we're pointing to the north correct. So to do that, we'll come up on to your tabs and go to the Manage tab. And we're going to do a couple things. We're going to click on Location. By default, every project in Revit starts in Boston. So what we can do here is under project address, you can either type in the address if you know it, or you might want to type in like Philadelphia, PA, and move it. And it's coming up. It's confused on if I meant Philadelphia or Philadelphia County. I want Philadelphia, so I'll click on that link. Zoom in. Right now it's right on City Hall. But our project is up here by Temple. So what you can do is you can hover over this little red arrow and kind of just drag it up. And I missed slightly. That over here. Yeah, you can put it right on the block, and really all this is doing is it is then selecting the closest weather station, which didn't change from when we were in Center City. So this is the weather station where it's going to be getting all the data that it's going to use. So with this in the right location, I'll hit OK. All right, that's step one. Step two, we want to make sure it knows which way is north. So to do that, come down to the site plan here, because typically your site plans are going to be directed towards true north. And what we're going to do is right here, see how it says Project North? We're going to switch that and say True North. Nothing seems to change. So to get into this with this orientation, Project North is what we're going to select so that your building is oriented north but orthogonal. So it would be square for you to draw on. True North will be, the plan will be slightly skewed, the 7 or 8 degrees that Philadelphia is skewed. So now that we're on True North, we can actually edit our position. So here it says Rotate True North. So what I'm going to do is drag my little rotation piece over here. I'm going to make sure I move it onto the same line. All right. And so what that did was it changed my true north to be perfectly straight up and down. So I'm going to hit undo and just do that again to go through it. So I was on here on the Manage tab. I went to Position, Rotate True North. And what I want to do is place my location, or the location of the center of my rotation. Click on the end of this. Then I'm going to click on the other endpoint so I can start rotating it. And you can see it wants to snap to 11.31 because that gets us straight up and down. So when I click, everything rotates, including the imported file, and that lets me now know that I have a true north. So now we're pointing correctly. So if I come back to level 1, you can see that's still pointed project north, where project north is this way. That's fine, because this is orthogonal, it's easy to draw on. But now the computer in the back of its mind knows that true north is slightly off angle, and it'll compensate with the way the sun works with our site. All right, so let's make a topo surface now that will be the basis of our topography for this area. So to do that, what we can do is we're going to do it 2 different ways because, for one, we're missing topography that comes through here. So we're going to have to make some of that up. But we have this topography. So just so you can see what we're dealing with, we're going to make ourselves a new 3D axon view. And you can do that either by clicking on this little house up here, or by going to View, 3D View, clicking down and saying Default 3D View. And what this does is it shows you what you have in 3D. So we have a cube over here, and if I hold down Shift and rotate by pushing in my scroll wheel, you'll see that our topography is actually three-dimensional. It came out of AutoCAD at the right height off of sea level. So right now, 0, 0 is where everything was placed in. However, this topography is coming in around 80-something feet above sea level, which is good, because that's where we're going to start with our topo surface. So to make this, if I jump back to level 1, you'll see these are all labeled. So 88, 87, kind of starting down, I guess around 80. Yeah. So we start at 80, and we go up to 88, so it's 8 feet of difference. So the way we're going to do this is we are going to go to Massing and Site and say I want to make a topo surface. Once we're in the topo surface dialog, we have the option to place points, create from import, simplify surface. What we're going to do right now is we're going to do a hybrid. We're going to place some points, but we're also going to create from import to take the data that is already in this topography. So starting off, let's set our elevation at 80 feet. We know that's the lowest point we have. We know it might not be the most accurate thing to start this off, but what we're going to do is place 4 points at 80 feet. So we're going to go on these corners. And all I'm doing now you can see now that I have 3, it starts to generate, is just to make a flat surface right now. And if I hit escape, so I stop drawing points, you'll see that all that's still above this is the CAD file's topo surface. So now we want to take these points and shape this surface to that. So what I can do is, since we're in this 3D view and we're just looking at it from the top, click on the side just so we can look at it from the side, rotate it around, and you can see there's our north arrow flying around out there, that these contours are above the rest of the site that I made. So now I'm going to hit Create from Import and say Select Import Instance. There's only one CAD file you can select in here. Click on it. We're going to select Check None and click on Topo, because that's the layer that this green topography is on, and hit OK. And you can see what it did is it added more points just there where all this information, where that information is, and then it tries to work itself back to these points out here. So what you could do now is looking at it from the top again. So we can always edit this to make it a little bit more accurate. We know, and for one, so that we can see the site's actually below this surface. That's why you can't see it in this view now. You can come down here and change from hidden line to wireframe, and you can see the rest of the site below. So what we might want to do is, since we know that these points are at 80, is we might want to add some more points. So I'm going to place a point at 80 and just pretend like we are tracking this contour line through the site, how it probably actually goes through the site. Just like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing with 81. So this is 81. I'm going to place a point, say 81 feet. And you can see how your contours adjust based on where points are placed. And that is just how Revit does its contours. It's not about lines, it's about actual points in space. So you can even decide to come in and place a point at 79, because I assume 79 is going to do something like this coming through. And what that does is it gives you a little bit better of a topo surface to work with. We're still sloping a lot down over here. What you can do is, if you don't want to slope down as much, we can guesstimate on how high this point would be. So So when I click on that point, I could say, well, what if this was at 85? All right, so that looks a little bit better because we're not sloping all over the place. We can do the same thing over here. Get this up to 85. So you can clearly edit these points more as you learn more about where they probably actually are. But what this does is when I hit finish up here, which is this check mark, and then I'm going to switch either to a hidden line view, there's a hidden line, or a shaded view, is now we have a surface that is our site. So the next thing to do would be to cut the streets into it, or cut the blocks out of the overall. So to do that, I'm going to just keep working in this 3D view. I am going to switch back into Wireframe so I can see everything below us. And what I'm going to do is we're going to try and make subsurfaces inside of this piece that will let us define the materials for the blocks and the roads. So with that, we're going to come over here and we're going to do, on Masking and Site, we're going to do a subregion. It doesn't even ask us which topography we want to do that subregion in because there's only one. So we have these drawing commands here, and what we're going to do is we're going to select the outside of one of these blocks. And if I hover over this and hit Tab, let's see if it lets me select everything. It does not seem to want to let me do that. It lets me do it on the inner curve, but not the outer curve. Let's see if it does that for every block. Alright, so since it's doing it that way, what we're going to do is we're going to select the inner curve. So hover over it with the pick lines tool selected. Hover over one of these segments and push Tab once, and then click. And what you've done is made a solid shape all the way around, and that's cutting out a region. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Finish Region, and that region is that block. And then we will come back to Masking and Site, do a subregion again, and we're going to do a separate subregion for each block. Otherwise, they will all be connected, and they will all want to have the same material, and we won't be able to switch out between them. So keep working through. Subregion, pick lines. Push Tab once. Don't hold down Tab, otherwise it's going to just start blinking on you. Okay. So what happens when we're doing this is the beginnings of a pretty common command in Revit, which is, this one's going to be a pain, isn't it? It's the beginnings of a pretty common command in Revit, which is kind of the profile drawing command. It's how you would make floors and roofs and things like that, is you draw these pink lines. You can tab through and make sure you select what you want selected. So I'm just doing this one without using the pick line command since it doesn't seem to want to play nice. So I will edit this AutoCAD file prior to giving it to all of you so that you don't have to do what I'm doing. But what this is showing you is you can also just draw lines in like this. And just make sure we're hitting our endpoints. I'm going to hit Tab until I hit it. There we go. And this is exactly how you would draw a floor, a roof, or any item like that. It's very similar. You can use Tab again to make sure that you are hitting the endpoints you want to hit. So I'm tapping Tab until I get to that endpoint. Snap back there. Switch it back to a straight line. I'm going to hit Tab like that. It's complaining about lines being slightly off axis, that's okay. That's just this CAD file is slightly off axis. And I get all the way around and I hit check mark, and that's done. So what we want to do is march around and do that for all of our locations. And what it lets us do later is we can assign different materials to these other subregions. And once we've done that, this will look more like a streets and blocks. So I am going to skip ahead, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to actually put in all of these lines so that the site is done. Alright, so with the subregions all made, we can now select each one of those or select the site, and we're able to change its material. So if I select the site, if I just come over here, you can see if I select on the edge, it'll say topography. And the material is by category. That means it goes to the default setup for this project for that category, which in this case looks like dirt. So what you can do, and I just did it really quick, so I'll do it again. Click on it, and there's these three little dots in a gray box. Click on that, and that lets us pick other materials. So I can see what else is just loaded in here. They have asphalt shingles, but not asphalt paving. So what we want to do is probably load in a new, or create a new material. So let's say create a new material. What you can do is you can even right-click on it and say street. Go back down to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to want to load in a new asset material for that. So I am going to click on this little button right here, and that brings in this asset browser. So these are materials that are not loaded into the library, but it's good practice to make the material or what you're putting the material on over here. So in this case, I made it a generic street, so we can always change it later. And then we can search in here for asphalt. And they should show up under site. Let's see. Yeah. So down here in the appearance library, site work, we have asphalt dark gray. And if I click over on this, it'll assign that to the active material over here. So now you can see that my street has an asphalt texture map on it. And it's even rendering it right here. So I'm going to close this for a second. And with street selected, I'm going to hit OK. And what it did was it changed the material to street. And now you can see we have a material on our streets. So you can start to see our sites coming together. You can also come back in and apply grass to the rest of these subregions. You can even do different types of grass if you want to. So let's say I select a subregion like that. You can hover, you can move around on it until you see just that subregion start glowing. See how the edges of it turn blue? If I click on it, its material is now also by category, and I can change that. And for this, I'll create a new material. Right click on it, rename, say grass. Hit enter. Alright, so with that selected, I'm going to open up my asset browser again. And we can search for grass. Hit enter. And it comes up with a whole bunch of different types of grass. I don't know if you feel strongly about bluegrass or generic grass or grass high quality, but you could select any one of these and push over and close the access browser, and it applies the material map to this material that you have selected. So be careful not to select other materials that you might want to keep, because it'll change them. And in here, it now renders in a little appearance of this grass. This is an image map. You can always download your own if you want to. But for now, this is it. I'll hit OK, and that changes that material to grass. So in this type, if I click on the subsurface again and edit the material. In the shaded render, it does not use the render appearance. So this is the render appearance of grass. Under graphics, it's not using the render appearance. So we'll say use it, and it'll pick a green color that's close enough. That way, when we're in a shaded view, like this, because we're in shaded, it'll show it as grass. So I can then go around, hold down Control, select the rest of these subregions I missed, selected the whole thing, deselect. Now I can even just type in grass, and if I use the same case and I spell it correctly, hit enter, it'll find that material and it'll apply it. So now we have a site, and it's doing pretty good. Next up is we're going to start tackling levels. So right now you only have a few levels in here. We have level 1 and level 2, and they're not nearly at the right locations for level 1 and level 2. So what we're going to do is let's go to one of those levels. And we're going to want to see if we want to do an elevation first. So what we can do is, since we know our building is going to be somewhere in here, I'm going to hit escape again. I went to view, I clicked down and said elevation. And so since we deleted the original elevations, we might want to put in new elevations. So let's at least start with this one. And what I can do now is, if I click on it, you'll see a line of what it thinks it wants to cut. I will reduce that so that it is more or less just our site by grabbing these little blue balls and reducing it down. And then this tab is how far you want to look. We'll look through our site. Now if I double click on this, it's going to show us more or less a section through our site. So what we're going to want to do is we need to get way up here, and right now our level 1 is way down there. So I'm actually going to come in here and delete level 2. Now I'm going to right click on level 1 and rename it and call it Datum. That is basically our sea level datum now. Sure. I'm going to delete level 2 of the ceiling plan. And then in my 3D view, I'm going to come over here and select level 2 and actually delete it out of the model. And while we're still in this view, I'm going to click on the datum level, which you can see takes up propagates a very small percentage of the site. So because it's this small, and it's not even underneath our site, this means it won't show up in any one of our views through our site. So I'm going to grab the grips on it and drag it so that it sits underneath, roughly sits underneath our block. The reason why I'm doing this is because it wasn't showing up in our elevation. And it won't show up in any view that doesn't cut through it. So let's get this in the right spot and jump back to my elevation down here. And you'll see now way down here, there is good old datum elevation. And so what we're going to do now is we can copy this and use it for the other levels on our site. So I don't know if everyone's figured out what height they think their ground floor will roughly be. But basically we're going to guess at it now, get a datum in there, and then just leave it. And if you find that you need to move your ground floor up and down a foot, we will move that datum later once you've even tied walls to it, and the walls will come with it. So I'll copy this. So what I'm doing is I have selected that level, and I can copy it now, however much we want to do. So I'm just going to copy it and leave it up here. And then you could say, well, no, I think it's going to be like 82 feet. And you can click on this and type 82, and it'll actually move down to the right location, and we can rename it. Either level 1, or we can rename it ground. And then what some people might want to do is make a second floor. So we can copy this one. I don't know, move it up about 20 feet. And this could be, so I click on the actual name, level 2. And if you, I think you have more floors, you can go up more. The other thing you can do is we can take one of these and make it for the existing buildings on the site. It's not something that we'll ever want to show in a elevation of the project, but it'll be good to have a baseline for our existing buildings for them to start coming out of the ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this and make this existing buildings. And if you know the exact height of the existing schoolhouse or something else, you can call it that. But for now, we're going to leave it that way. And what that lets us do is we could start making our shapes for our existing buildings. So I'm going to jump back to my 3D view. You can see our levels in 3D are happening right in here. And you can also see all of these buildings underneath. So if I go to Wireframe by typing WF or coming down here and going to Wireframe, what we're going to want to do is make some of these existing buildings. So very simply, let's just make some simple masses of our site, starting with this building. If you have a Rhino file of the site, or you've already started making 3D buildings, that's okay. We can import the Rhino file in and then turn it into REVIT objects. And I've attached another link to another video on how to bring in Rhino objects into REVIT. Basically, all you can do once you bring them in is trace them. And you're going to want to do that because you do not want to leave it as a Rhino object. It's just going to come in. You can trace it very quickly into REVIT components and make it work in your model. In this case, we're going to just make some masses for these pieces. So I am going to go to Masses in Site, and I'm going to do a in-place mass. Okay, mass 1. I'm going to set my ground plane to be the existing building, and I'm going to use my drawing tools. Well, let's see if I can just do a pick line on this guy. I can. All right, so I'm going to have pick line selected. We're drawing on the work plane. I hover over one of these lines and push tab and click. I say finish mass. And what it is right now is it's just a flat surface right on that work plane. So what we want to do is we want to give it a 3D, we want to extrude it basically. So if I click on it again, I'm going to edit in place. Click on it. And I'm going to say create form, solid form. And what it does is it makes it into a solid form at 90 feet tall. That's a little tall. I'm not positive on how tall this building is, but it's not 90, I don't think. And you can type in the height that you want it to be and hit finish. So now if I type SD for shaded, you can see that there is a school building on our site. And we can add more detail to this later. And the nice thing about the massing is that it will it can be used to trace into actual components later if we need it to be, or we can leave it as a mass forever and call it a day, and that'll be that. So I'm going to make some of these other masses on the site, starting off from the same level, which might not be accurate, but just as a starting point, since I don't have a lot of data on these other structures. So I'm going to go back to a top view, and as a separate mass, make some of these other houses. So I'm going to go switch back to Wireframe. And, all right. I might make some of these all together in one mass. Massing inside, in place mass, mass 2. So we are drawing on, we want to make sure we're on the building and we're drawing on the work plane. There's 1, 2. I'm just hovering over with my pick lines, pushing tab, and selecting. I believe this one's a little taller, so I'll do that one separately. So with that, we're in the 3D view. You can see all of these. I'm going to want to go around and create forms for each one of them. That's about 30 feet. Create form. We're making solid forms. Yeah, we might as well do that last house. I'm actually going to hit create form while we're looking down on it. Alright, so that might be getting a little tall. So to change it, make sure you select all of the top. And we could switch it down to, let's say, 40 feet. See, I'm just selecting one line here. That's not what we want. We want to hit tab, 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 select the whole top, click. Say that one's 40 feet. Tab, tab, tab. Feet. Alright, so we have some of those, so I can hit finish mask. Now if I do type SD, or if I come down here and say shaded, you can see what we have. Alright, so we're starting to make some of our site. So we can go around, march around, and make all of these buildings, and put them all on the site. So the next thing, after you've made all these buildings, is we're going to want to edit the type, or edit this so that it actually has a material that will cast shadows. Because right now, these masses always just want to be this translucent color that doesn't cast shadows and isn't very useful. So if I edit it in place and click on the actual whole piece like that, you can see it's by category again. So what we might want to do is just create a new material. Any one of these new materials will cast shadows. And I'm going to rename it, site buildings. Alright, so it's just a gray color. This is a fairly dark gray color. We can always make it something a little lighter. And then hit OK. So that is now site buildings. I'm actually going to copy that material. So when I hit finish, and I click on these ones, I can edit them in place. I'm just going to select all of them. Paste that name, apply it, and hit finish mask. So there. Now we're more solid, and we can actually get a lot of messages apparently. See shadows. I turn the shadows on. So that is good. That's how we can start building out our site. We can also make these masses off of imported elements. So this is the starting point for building up our building, and this is how we get this going. And so this is what we're going to focus on this week for getting our site ready for you to start putting your concepts on over here. And so we'll go over this, and maybe we'll get to some studies in this class, but it normally takes a while to get everyone used to these tools. So this will be the bulk of what we have to do today in class.